After dinner, Ethan went to his room and Clara sat in the living room reading one of Michael's old books. She tried to focus, but her mind drifted to the way Ethan had looked at her that morning, kind but distant. Like someone who wanted to say more but didn't know how. The clock ticked softly. The house, though brighter now, still carried the same emptiness. She sighed and closed the book. Maybe she just needed company. She walked down the hallway and gently knocked on Ethan's door. "Are you awake?" "Yeah, come in," he said. He was sitting on his bed sketching something in his notebook. The lamp beside him cast a warm glow on the page. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Not really," she admitted, smiling faintly. "It's too quiet." He set the notebook aside. "You can stay here again if you want. I promise I don't snore." Clara laughed softly. The first real laugh in a long time. "You sure?" "You used to when you were 16, Ethan grinned. "I outgrew it, mostly." She sat at the edge of the bed and he leaned back against the wall. For a moment they just listened to the sound of light rain outside. "You've changed a lot," she said after a while. "You're more patient now, calmer. College does that," he replied. Then he paused. "And losing someone does, too." Clara looked at him carefully. His words were simple, but they carried weight. He had grown into a man during his father's absence. She could see the reflection of Michael, in him the same kindness, the same steady presence. "I used to think I'd never be okay again," she admitted quietly. "After your father. I didn't know how to keep living without him." Ethan nodded. "I know what you mean. For a while, I couldn't even walk past his study. Everything in there still smells like him." They both looked toward the hallway where that study waited untouched since the funeral. Neither had found the courage to open it. After a long pause, Ethan said softly, "He loved you, you know? More than I've ever seen anyone love another person." Clara's breath caught. "He told you that?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, he said you made him believe in second chances." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "He said the same about you," she whispered. "He worried about leaving you, even when he was sick. He wanted to make sure you were strong enough to handle the world." Ethan's voice broke a little. "I wasn't, not at first, but I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying," Clara said, her tone gentle but firm. "You're becoming the man he always hoped you'd be." For a moment, their eyes met, and something shifted quietly between them. It wasn't romantic, it was human, deep, and full of shared understanding. It was the kind of connection that comes from shared pain, from helping each other hold what's too heavy to carry alone. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, but neither of them moved. Ethan finally spoke again, voice low. "You should lie down, Clara. You'll get a stiff neck sitting like that." She hesitated, then nodded, lying back on top of the blanket. The bed was soft and the sound of the rain was calming. Ethan stayed sitting, flipping through his sketchbook. "What are you drawing?" she asked softly. He showed her a half-finished sketch of the lake from that old photo. "It helps me think," he said. "Sometimes I draw just to remember him." Clara smiled faintly. "It's beautiful." "Thanks," he said. "I guess drawing's my way of keeping him close." She nodded. "We all need something for that." Minutes passed. The storm grew quieter and her eyes started to close. Ethan looked at her, then blew out the candle to let her rest. In the faint light from the window, her face looked calm, no longer burdened by the sadness she usually carried. He whispered, almost to himself, "Dad would have been glad you're not alone tonight." Clara, half asleep, heard his words. "Neither are you," she murmured back. Ethan smiled, though she didn't see it. He sat there for a while longer, listening to the rain until he drifted off too. The night passed peacefully. When morning came, sunlight filled the room, warm and gold. The world outside felt alive again, clean and bright. For the first time in months, Clara woke up not to loneliness, but to a quiet sense of belonging. The grief was still there, but it no longer ruled her heart. Something gentler had taken its place. She glanced at Ethan, still asleep by the window. She didn't know what the days ahead would bring, but for the first time since Michael's death, she felt ready to face them. The storm was over. And something new had begun. The days after the storm passed quietly. The air outside grew warmer, and sunlight began to pour through the windows of the Benson house again. For Clara, life started to move at a steadier rhythm. The silence in the house was no longer as heavy as before. Ethan's presence made it softer, less lonely. He had a way of bringing calm without saying much, the same quiet strength that his father once had. Clara spent her mornings tending to the garden, something she had avoided since Michael's death. The roses were blooming again, and for the first time in months she felt joy in simple things. Ethan often joined her, helping to trim branches or fix the old fence. They didn't talk much while working, but their quiet teamwork carried an easy comfort. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead and said, "You kept this garden alive all by yourself." Clara smiled faintly. "Not very well. I almost gave up a few times." He nodded. "Dad used to say you were the only one who could keep these flowers alive." I think he was right. The words warmed her heart. Hearing him speak of Michael so naturally felt healing, not painful. She glanced at Ethan and saw how much he had matured. The shy boy she had met years ago was gone. In his place was a man who carried loss with quiet dignity. Later that day, Ethan went into town to buy groceries. When he returned, he brought Clara her favorite tea without her asking. "They had that cinnamon blend you like," he said casually, setting it on the counter. Clara paused, touched. "You remembered?" He shrugged, smiling a little. "You used to make it every Sunday morning." It was a small gesture, but it meant more to her than he knew. For the first time since Michael's passing, someone had noticed the small things that made her feel like herself again. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they shared dinner together. The soft orange glow of twilight filled the kitchen. Clara prepared roasted vegetables while Ethan talked about college's classes, friends, and the pressures of figuring out what came next. "I'm thinking of changing my major," he said between bites. "Dad wanted me to study business, but I don't think that's me." Clara tilted her head. "Then what do you want?" He looked thoughtful. "Something creative, maybe architecture. I like building things, designing spaces that make people feel at peace." "That sounds like something you'd be good at," she said sincerely. "You've always had an eye for detail." Ethan smiled. "Thanks. It's nice to have someone believe in me." Clara felt her chest tighten with emotion. She reached across the table, resting her hand briefly over his. "Your father would be proud. You don't need to follow his exact path to honor him. You just need to live your life fully." He didn't move his hand away. "I'll try," he said softly. "You make it sound possible." They held each other's gaze for a quiet moment before Clara gently pulled her hand back, not wanting to make things awkward. But in that small exchange, something unspoken passed between them: trust, warmth, and a shared understanding that both needed someone to hold on to. Even if just in spirit. Days passed and their bond deepened naturally. They found small ways to help each other heal. Ethan would fix things around the house door hinges, old bulbs, creaky steps, while Clara cooked his favorite meals or helped him organize his projects. Their home began to feel alive again one evening. After cleaning the kitchen together, Ethan said, "You know, I used to avoid this house. It felt too big without Dad, but now it feels like home again." Clara turned to him with a faint smile. "That makes me happy. I was scared it never would." He hesitated, then said quietly, "You made it home again." Those words lingered in her mind long after he went to bed. She sat on the porch, sipping tea, thinking about how strange life could be, how loss could break two people apart, yet slowly bring them closer in unexpected ways. A few days later, they decided to finally open Michael's old study. It had remained untouched since his death. Dust had gathered on the desk, and the air smelled faintly of paper and cedar. Ethan walked in first, his steps careful. Clara followed, her heart racing. She ran her fingers over the old books and notes scattered on the table. There were photos tucked into drawers, Michael fishing, smiling. Living. Ethan found an old letter tucked between two books. He unfolded it slowly, then handed it to her. It's for you, he said softly. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she read Michael's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Take care of Ethan. He's stronger than he knows. And take care of yourself too, Clara. Don't close your heart. Love doesn't end, just changes form. Her hand trembled as she held the letter. He knew, she whispered. He knew how hard this would be. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. He wanted you to keep living, Clara. We both should. She turned to him, tears in her eyes. You sound just like him. He smiled sadly. Maybe that's a good thing. For a moment they stood there, two people bound not just by grief, but by the love of the same man who had shaped both their lives. The air in the room felt lighter, almost peaceful. The night had fallen quietly over the small Oregon town. A soft drizzle danced across the rooftops, painting silver lines down the windows. Inside the Benson house, silence stretched through every room. The kind of silence that follows after someone important is gone. Ever since Michael Benson had passed away, the house no longer felt like home to Clara. It was only a building now cold, still, and filled with memories she wasn't ready to face. Clara had always been strong. She was the kind of woman who kept things in order, even when her heart was breaking. She smiled for the neighbors. She answered calls from relatives. She even kept up the garden Michael had loved. But when the sun went down and the lights dimmed, her strength faded. The loneliness crept in, quiet but heavy. Settling deep in her chest like winter air, that evening the sky turned dark faster than usual. The wind howled through the trees, and a low growl of thunder rolled over the hills. Clara stood by the kitchen window, watching the storm build. She thought of how Michael used to tease her about being scared of thunder. It's just the sky stretching, he would say, laughing. Now without him, the sound made her heart jump. Upstairs, Ethan. Michael's son from his first marriage was unpacking his bags. He had returned from college for a short visit, a quiet young man with kind eyes and a thoughtful nature. Clara had known him since he was 15. He had always been polite, but after his father's death, something inside him had changed. He spoke less, smiled rarely, and often stayed in his room, lost in his thoughts. Clara didn't blame him. They were both grieving in their own ways. They had lost the same person, but from different parts of their hearts. For Clara, Michael had been her husband, her partner, her steady hand. For Ethan, he had been his father, his guide, his safety. Losing him had left them both searching for something that no longer existed. When the storm grew stronger, the power flickered once, twice, and then the house went dark. The only sound was the rain hammering against the roof. Clara's heart raced. She had never liked being alone in the dark. She reached for her phone, but the signal was gone too. Somewhere down the hallway, she heard a door open. Clara. Ethan's voice called out. It was calm, but slightly unsure. I'm okay, she answered, her voice shaking more than she intended. Just startled. Stay there. I'll get a candle. A few moments later, the faint glow of a small flame appeared in the hallway. Ethan walked in with a candle in his hand, his shadow stretching across the wall. He looked tired but concerned. The power's out across the street too, he said. It's a big storm. Clara nodded. I'll just wait it out in the living room. But another crash of thunder made her flinch. The windows rattled, and for a moment she thought the wind might break through. Ethan noticed and gave a small smile. You can stay in my room if you want. It's warmer there. The windows are smaller. Clara hesitated. She didn't want to seem fragile, but her hands were already trembling. Maybe just for a while, she said softly. Ethan led her to his room. It was simple and neat, a few books stacked on the nightstand. A framed picture of him and his father on the dresser, and a half-finished sketch on his desk. The candlelight made everything feel softer, almost peaceful. Here, Ethan said, pulling a blanket from the chair. You can sit on the bed. I'll take the chair. Clara smiled faintly. You don't have to. It's your room. It's fine, he said. You look cold. She sat down at the foot of his bed, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. The air smelled faintly of old paper and rain. For the first time that night, she felt a little safer. Ethan sat across from her. his face calm in the candlelight. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was quiet in a way that felt familiar, as if both understood that words weren't needed. They were two people bound by loss, finding comfort in simply existing near each other. After a while, Clara said quietly, "You remind me of him?" Ethan looked up. "My dad." "Yes," she said. "When you sit like that, you have the same look in your eyes." He used to sit just like that when he was thinking. Ethan gave a small, sad smile. "I didn't think I remembered things like that anymore." "He'd be proud of you," Clara said softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the candle flame instead. "I still hear him sometimes," he whispered. "Not like a ghost or anything. Just memories. When I'm working or when it rains like this." Clara nodded. "Me too." The storm outside roared, shaking the windows again. Without thinking, Clara pulled the blanket tighter. Ethan noticed and quietly stood up. He grabbed another blanket from the closet and handed it to her. "Here," he said, his voice gentle. She accepted it, smiling faintly. "Thank you." For a while, they just listened to the rain. There was something strangely comforting about it, the way it filled the silence that grief had left behind. Clara found herself looking at Ethan again. He had grown so much. Not just older, but steadier. There was kindness in his eyes, a quiet strength that reminded her of Michael. The thought made her chest tighten. She looked away quickly, focusing on the flickering flame. She didn't want him to see her cry. Ethan broke the silence again, his tone lighter this time. "You always make tea when it rains. You used to do that with Dad." Clara laughed softly. "Old habits. Kay can make some," he offered, but she shook her head. "No need. I think I'll just sit here for a while." He nodded and sat back in his chair. The thunder faded to a soft rumble. The storm was moving on, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave. The air felt heavy with things, unsaid shared memories, buried pain, quiet gratitude. Clara looked around the room once more. There were traces of Michael everywhere, his handwriting on an old note, a fishing photo, a watch on the shelf. Yet for the first time in months, those reminders didn't make her break down. They made her feel connected. Ethan leaned his head back, eyes half closed. "You know," he said softly, "it's not as lonely when you're here." Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was a whisper. "I know." Outside, the rain began to slow. The candle flickered lower, and Clara's eyes grew heavy. She didn't mean to fall asleep, but exhaustion finally caught up with her. The last thing she heard was the soft rhythm of the rain and Ethan's quiet breathing across the room. For the first time in a long while, she didn't dream about loss. She simply dreamed of quiet, a peace she thought she had, forgotten. And somewhere between the sound of rain and the stillness of morning, the first threads of healing began to form. This version stays completely within YouTube's monetization policies, emotional, clean, and mature without any explicit or suggestive content. Morning came slowly after the long, stormy night. The sound of dripping water echoed softly from the porch roof. The sky outside was still gray, but the worst of the storm had passed. Clara woke up to the faint light of dawn slipping through the curtains. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, till she realized where she was. Lethan's room. The blanket was still wrapped around her shoulders. The candle had melted down to a small puddle of wax on the table. She sat up quickly, embarrassed that she had fallen asleep there. Ethan was still in the room, sitting by the window, staring outside. He turned when he heard her move. "Good morning," he said with a small smile. "You slept through the rest of the storm." Clara brushed her hair back, her cheeks warm. "I didn't mean to. I must have been more tired than I thought." "It's okay," he said. "You looked peaceful. I didn't want to wake you." Something in the way he said that made her heart stir. There was no awkwardness in his voice, only quiet care. She nodded and looked toward the rain-washed world outside. The trees glittered with droplets, and the air felt clean, new. She stood up, smoothing her sweater. "I'll make breakfast," she said. Downstairs, the house smelled of damp air and coffee. Ethan joined her, helping without being asked. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them wasn't heavy like before. It felt gentle, like they were both learning to breathe again. After breakfast, Ethan washed the dishes while Clara wiped the counters. He asked about her work, her garden, and the neighbors she used to chat with. His voice was calm and thoughtful, so much like his father's that it almost hurt. When she turned to put the dishes away, her eyes met the framed photo on the kitchen, while Michael smiling with his arm around Ethan at a lake years ago. Her heart clenched. He loved that day, she said softly. Ethan looked up. Yeah, he caught a fish half the size of that boat, he said, laughing quietly. Then his smile faded. I still can't believe he's gone. Clara rested her hand on the table. I know, she whispered. Some days I still reach out to tell him things. Then I remember. They both went quiet. The sound of rain outside filled the silence again. That evening, the storm clouds returned, but this time the thunder was far away. The lights flickered back to life, filling the house with a warm glow. Clara felt grateful for the light, but she also missed the quiet comfort of that candlelit night. That night they sat together on the porch again, the sky clear and full of stars. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. You know, Ethan said quietly, I used to be angry at the world, at Dad for leaving, at myself for not saying more to him. Clara looked at him gently. I was angry too, but the truth is, love always leaves something behind. And I think that's what we're holding on to now. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's what he meant, changing form. They sat in silence after that, both lost in thought. The world around them felt calm, almost sacred. Inside, the house glowed softly from the lights they had left on. It no longer felt haunted by the past. Instead, it felt filled with memory, with care, with quiet healing before heading to bed. Ethan turned to her and said, Thanks for everything. Clara, for staying strong when I couldn't. She smiled faintly. You've been strong too, Ethan, more than you think. He looked at her for a moment, his expression sincere. I think we helped each other. And she knew he was right. That night, Clara couldn't sleep right away. She lay in bed, listening to the faint creak of the house and the gentle wind outside. She thought of how far they had come since that first stormy night, the fear, the loneliness, the silence, and how now. All of it felt softer. The ache of loss was still there, but it had turned into something else. Something gentler. It was no longer a wound. It was a reminder that love, in all its forms, endures. Before she drifted to sleep, she whispered to herself, Thank you, Michael. We're okay now. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Autumn had arrived quietly. The air in the small Oregon town grew crisp, and golden leaves danced across the streets. The Benson house, once filled with silence and sorrow, now carried a gentler energy. The pain of loss had softened into memory. And laughter sometimes found its way back into the rooms. Clara stood by the window one morning, watching the leaves fall from the maple tree Michael had planted years ago. The sunlight poured through the branches, painting the room in shades of gold. It reminded her of hope, fragile, but real. Ethan was packing upstairs. His short break from college had come to an end. And though he didn't say much about it, Clara could sense he didn't want to leave. The house had become more than just a place to visit. It had become a part of his healing. Clara made breakfast coffee, eggs and toast, just like she used to make for Michael before work. When Ethan came down carrying his duffel bag, she smiled warmly. You ready? He nodded, sitting at the table. Almost. I just keep feeling like I'm forgetting something. She poured him coffee. That's how it always feels before you leave home. He smiled faintly. Home? He repeated, as if testing the word. Yeah, it actually feels like that again. They ate quietly for a while, both trying to pretend it was a normal morning. But the unspoken truth sat between them: his absence would be felt. The house would grow quiet again, and the rooms would echo with memory. Still, this time, Clara knew it wouldn't be the same kind of emptiness. It would be peaceful, not painful. After breakfast, Ethan helped her wash the dishes. "You shouldn't do all this alone," he said. "I'll manage," she replied with a gentle smile. "I always do." He dried a plate, then looked at her. "You're different now," he said suddenly. "Happier." She paused. "I guess I am. You helped with that." He looked away, a little shy. "You helped me too." When they finished cleaning, Ethan went upstairs to grab the last of his things. Clara followed him, leaning against the doorframe as he zipped his bag. His room looked tidier than before, but it carried signs of life: a book on the desk, a sweater folded neatly, a mug by the window. "You kept this room nice, Kay," she said. He grinned. "Had to. It's the only room with a decent view." She walked over to the window. Outside, the hills stretched under a soft golden light. "Your father used to sit here," she said. He said the view reminded him that life keeps moving, no matter what happens. Ethan nodded. "I think he'd be glad we're still here, still moving." They stood together for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Ethan slung his bag over his shoulder. "I should go. The bus leaves in 20 minutes. Clara walked him to the door. The wind was cool and carried the scent of pine. She wanted to say so many things: how proud she was of him, how grateful she felt for the quiet comfort he had given her, but words felt too small. Instead, she hugged him. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "Call me when you get there." "I will," he promised, hugging her back. "And thank you, Clara, for everything. For not giving up on me." She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "You're family, Ethan. I never could." He smiled, the same warm, steady smile his father once had. Then he turned toward the gate and started down the path. Clara stood in the doorway, Key watching until he disappeared at the end of the road. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel lonely this time. It felt peaceful, filled with memories that no longer hurt. She took a deep breath and went back inside as she walked through the hallway. Something caught her eye: a small folded note on Ethan's desk. She picked it up and opened it carefully. His handwriting was neat but slightly rushed. "Clara, thank you for staying when everything felt broken. You reminded me that love doesn't die. It just changes shape. I'll see you soon. Ethan." Clara held the note to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. She sat down on his bed, reading the words again and again. For a long time, she didn't move. It felt like a message not just from Ethan, but from Michael too, as if through their son he had spoken one last time. She smiled softly through her tears. "You both saved me," she whispered. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. She stood, folded the note neatly, and placed it beside the framed photo of Michael and Ethan that still sat on the nightstand. In the following weeks, Clara kept herself busy. She went back to her part-time job at the local library, started baking again, and even joined a small gardening club in town. People noticed the change in her: how she smiled more, how her voice carried warmth again. Every Sunday, she would sit on the porch with her tea and think about Ethan. Sometimes he called. Sometimes he sent photos from college: smiling faces, city lights, sketches of buildings. Each time she saw them, her heart filled with pride. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Ethan. Inside was a small photo of a building he was designing for a college. Project: a community library surrounded by gardens. On the back he had written, "Inspired by Dad's favorite place and your garden. I wanted to build something that feels like home." Clara felt her throat tighten as she read it. She placed the photo on her desk beside Michael's old pen. And for the first time, she realized how full her life had become again. The grief hadn't vanished. It had transformed. It had turned into purpose, into love that reached beyond loss. That evening, Stray made a cup of cinnamon tea and sat by the window. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for a moment, she could almost feel Michael's presence beside her. "You'd be proud of him," she whispered softly. "He's everything you hoped he'd be." The wind seemed to sigh gently, like a quiet reply. She smiled. As night settled in, she turned off the lights and let the moonlight fill the room. She thought of the journey they had all taken together: the storm, the pain, the small steps toward healing. It had taken time, but she finally understood what Michael's letter had meant. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It changes shape. It becomes the laughter in another room, the warmth of a shared meal, the courage to face another day. Clara looked around the room at the photos, the memories, the life still unfolding, and felt peace. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was living in the past. She was part of the present again. The Benson house stood quietly under the stars. No longer a place of grief, but a home reborn through love. And though Michael was gone, a part of him lived in every flower in the garden, every smile on Ethan's face, and every heartbeat that still dared to love after loss, as the wind whispered through the open window. Clara closed her eyes and said softly to the night, "Thank you for everything." And somewhere deep in the quiet, it felt like the universe answered back with warmth, with light, and with peace.